Buongiorno. Excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed professors, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to welcome you at the Biblioteca Alexandrina on behalf of my colleague, also Dr. Marwa Al-Wakil, head of the academic research sector. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our friend Mr. Mario De Pasquale, Honorary Consul of Italy in Alexandria, Monsieur Thomas Fauché, Director of the Centre d'études Alexandrines, our professors Francesca Bianchini, Dr. Costantino Paonessa, and Dr. Costanza Lisi. So today we're gathered in this historic city of Alexandria for a cultural seminar entitled Beyond Nostalgia, Histories and Archives of Italian Subalterns in Egypt, 1864 to 1937. And it's organized by the Alexandria Mediterranean Research Center of the Biblioteca Alexandrina in collaboration with the Honorary Consulate of Italy in Alexandria and the Centre d'études Alexandrines. The focus of this seminar is on a research project that explores the social history of Italian community in Egypt during the period, of course, 1864 to 1937. So the study adopts a unique approach, drawing on civil and criminal case records from the Italian consular courts in Cairo and Alexandria, documents preserved in the diplomatic historical archives of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Alexandria, as I'm sure you all know, has long stood as a beacon of knowledge and enlightenment. Its ancient library and lighthouse remain enduring symbols of science and wisdom. Historically, Alexandria attracted scholars, merchants, and travelers from the ancient world, establishing itself as one of the earliest cosmopolitan cities in human history. In the early 20th century, Alexandria once again became a vibrant cultural, social, and economic hub. It welcomed people of diverse nationalities and backgrounds who came in search of an opportunity of a better life, integrating into a unique and inclusive urban fabric. This diversity has been reflected in its architecture, public spaces, and the everyday life of its residents. Among the many vibrant communities that have enriched Alexandria, the Italian community has played a particularly integral role since the late 19th century. Italians contributed significantly to the city's commercial, cultural, and social life, enriching its diverse society, from artisans and merchants to intellectuals and professionals. The Italian presence helped shape Alexandria's identity as a cosmopolitan Mediterranean hub, leaving lasting impressions on its architecture, cuisine, and everyday life. And in fact, even left an impression on our language that we use today. I'm sure many of you have heard the terms, for example, in Arabic, roba vecchia, which comes from roba vecchia, meaning old stuff, or falso, from falso, or sta bene, that we say today as well, from sta bene, meaning it's fine. Even to the everyday life of our home, for example, veranda, sala, bagno, all of these are used in our everyday Egyptian language today. Benzina, gamberi, gelati, guanti, baruca. All of these, I'm sure, sound very familiar to you all. So today, the Biblioteca Alexandrina continues to serve as a center of excellence in the production and dissemination of knowledge, fostering dialogue, learning, and mutual understanding between people and cultures. The Library of Alexandria stands as Egypt's gateway to the world and the world's gateway to Egypt. I don't want to take too much of your time, but once again, I warmly welcome you all and wish you a fruitful and inspiring seminar. Grazie.
And now we would like to welcome His Excellency Mario De Pasquale, Honorary Consulate of Italy in Alexandria.
Buongiorno. It was very hard for me to choose the language I should do it. So I said to myself, I will have a discount from the translator because I'm going to say it in Arabic. It's easier for everyone, but not for the professors. انا فعلا كنت حضرت السبيتش بالايطالي، بس بعد كده قررت ان انا اغيرها، وانا مصمم ان انا اخد الخصم من المترجم على السبيتش بتاعتي. طبعا في البدايه انا حابب اشكر المكتبه، شكر كبير جدا لمكتبه اسكندريه، وبالاخص الدكتور احمد زايد على رعايته ودعمه المتواصل في كل المجالات الثقافيه والفنيه والعلميه. دايما المكتبه لها تعاون خاص مع القنصليه الايطاليه. طبعا دكتوره هبه الرافعي القائم باعمال قطاع العلاقات الخارجيه والاعلام، قمه التعاون دايما معانا، ودايما بتنورنا في الايفنتات بتاعتنا. طبعا في شكر خاص لمركز دراسات البحر المتوسط على مجهودهم الرائع وتعاونهم الدائم اللي خلى الحدث ده يطلع للنور. كانت متابعه معايا من اول يوم. صابرينا قريب طبعا لها شكر كبير ولها فضل كبير في خروج الايفنت ده وتنظيمه. ده مش اول تعاون بيننا وبين البحر المتوسط، مركز دراسات البحر المتوسط. احنا عملنا ايفنت ناجح جدا، كان عنوانه رحله عن المتاحف المصريه من بطليموس فيلادلفيس لجوزيب بوتي. كان بيتكلم عن المتحف اليوناني الروماني، وده كان بتاريخ 27 اكتوبر 2024. وان شاء الله تنتظروا ان هيبقى فيه ايفنتات تانية كتير، يعني اعتقد ممكن ايفنتين خلال السنه دي ان شاء الله نقدر نعملهم برضه. وكمان احب اشكر مركز الدراسات الفرنسي مستر توما فوشيه على ان هو وصلني بالدكتوريسا بيانكاني. هو دكتور فوشيه جاله الموضوع وشاف ان الموضوع كله يرجع لايطاليا، فهو بكل صداقه وصل لي الموضوع بحيث ان هو يقدر يطلع للنور ونبقى احنا الاثنين اشتغلنا فيه. فانا حابب اشكره على اللي هو عمله. Je ne sais pas si tu as compris quelque chose de ce que je dis. C'est bien. Je ne dois pas dire en français. Ça va. كنت ممكن اعمل السبيتش بالفرنسي برضه بس ما رضيتش. طيب المحاضرة النهارده موضوعها مهم قوي، لأنه بيسلط الضوء على تاريخ الجالية الإيطالية في مصر في الفترة المهمة من تاريخها الحديث من 1864 ل 1937. كانت مصر بتعيش تحولات كبيرة قوي، والجالية الإيطالية كان ليها بصمة واضحة في الحياة الاقتصادية والاجتماعية والثقافية. المحاضرة مش بس بتحكي تاريخ، لكن بتدخل في قصص بتاعت الناس العاديين من الإيطاليين اللي عاشوا في مصر، وبتكشف أرشيفات بتدي صورة أعمق وأغلى عن تجربة المهاجرين الإيطاليين وتأثيرهم على المجتمع المصري. زي ما تفضلت أستاذة هبة قالت إن في كلمات كتير قوي في مصر مشتقة من اللغة الإيطالية. أنا شخصياً متحمس جداً للموضوع لأني من الجيل الثالث اللي مولود في مصر، يعني من 1900، من بداية 1900 وإحنا العيلة بتاعتنا موجودة في مصر في اسكندرية، كلنا مولودين في اسكندرية، عشان كده يمكن بتكلم عربي شوية كويس مش كتير. وأنا برضو زيكم كده متشوق إن أنا أعرف معلومات أكتر عن الفترة دي. أتمنى أن المحاضرة النهاردة تكون تجربة مفيدة وممتعة لكل الحاضرين، وتفتح لنا أبواب جديدة لفهم تاريخ مصر الجميل والمتنوع بكل ثقافاته. شكراً.
And now a word for Monsieur Thomas Fauché, Director of Centre d'études d'Alexandrie.
Hello everyone, Your Excellency. I just will be very quick. Just a word to thank the Biblioteca for hosting this really important event. Thanks very much to Mario Di Pasquale for all the work he has been doing. Pushing the schedule of the Biblioteca Alexandrina is not an easy thing, and you did a great job to welcome this event today. I would like also to welcome the Professor Francesca Biancani and all the team. this very interesting topic. And as Centre Alexandrine is doing, is to collect as much as possible the data from antiquity until nowadays. But we have a lot of archive, a lot of press that we collect, and we also try to have a new view on this period of history of Alexandria. And I really like the title Beyond Nostalgia, because I think that's really a work we have collectively to do, to see the history in the terms of as historians, and to get rid of this idea of it was better before and everything, and to take what was the period for what it was, a magnificent period, a period of cosmopolitanism, which is really important to Alexandria, but which had also its dark sides. So I'm really happy that we have this conference today, and I'm really eager to learn more about the Italian community in Alexandria. Thanks to all, and have a good conference.
And now it's time for Beyond Nostalgia. We have with us, please welcome, Dottoressa Francesca Biancani, Dottoressa Costanza Lisi, and Dr. Costantino Paonessa.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor for me, and I'm sure my colleagues are feeling the same, to have the chance to present the research project we've been working on over the past 2 years in this prestigious venue this morning. For this, we're extremely, extremely grateful to all those who collaborated to organize this event. The Italian Honorary Consul of Alexandria, Mr. Mario De Pasquale, who never failed to show the most unflinching enthusiasm for this initiative, and I'm so very grateful. Professor Fauché, director of the CLX, who's been unbelievably responsive to my initial proposal. And of course, all the staff at the Biblioteca Alessandrina. Let me also thank Dr. Ahmed Mahmoud, the first person I talked about the possibility of holding this talk back in November 2024 when we met at the DAAW, the Digital Archives in the Arab World Conference in Abu Dhabi. It's clearly extremely exciting for us to be able to showcase our work today in such an iconic place as the Biblioteca, a cultural institution which is so integral to the enduring myth and fascination with Alexandrian cosmopolitanism, with the idea of Alexandria cosmopolitanism, in a place, Alexandria, which is so central to the history of that cosmopolitan era, whose revision and critical revision and reconsideration is a main endeavor of the project, as you will see. So today we are presenting you the scientific contents, archival technical objectives, and preliminary results of a project called Beyond, like Vernacosm, Vernacular Cosmopolitanism, History and Archives of Italian Subalterns in Egypt, 1864-1937. It's a PRIN project. PRIN stands for Research Project of National Interest, Progetti di Interesse Nazionale, funded by the University of Bologna, the Alma Mater Studiorum, the University of Modena Reggio Emilia, the Italian Ministry of Research and the University, through the EU Next Generation scheme. The project started back in September 2022, and it's bound to finish in September 2025, so in a few months, with the launch of a web platform called Vernacosm, integrating the archival outputs of the project. A catalog and inventory of the historical sources whose retrieval, reconditioning, and enhancement constituted one of the main of the cores of the project, one of the two cores of the project, as you will see. I'm talking about the papers of the Italian consulates of Alexandria and Cairo from 1861, basically like all the post-unitary period until the end of the capitulations, 1937. After a first elaboration on the project's potential to break new ground in studying the history of the Italians of Egypt, in the context, I would say, of a broader conversations about the study of the cosmopolitan era in Egypt, and a brief elaboration on the project's impact, that is what we consider to be the contemporary relevance of restoring really and publicly disseminating this kind of shared knowledge, like an entangled history in between Italy and Egypt in the present context. I will leave the floor to Costanza Lisi, who will guide you through the archival aspects, like really the technical archival aspects of the project. And then after a break, I will give the floor to Costantino Paolessa to showcase the preliminary historiographical results, like how we went about the corpus of sources we enhanced. So this project, this project in fact consists of two main components, which are clearly, strongly interrelated, an archival one and an historiographical one. In terms of archival conservation aims, the project centered about the retrieval and the enhancement of the archives of a very specific set of endangered archival sources currently stored at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Historical and Diplomatic Archives, the ASMAE, Archivio Storico-Diplomatico del Ministero degli Affari Esteri in Rome. We worked, as I said before, on all the papers of the consulate in Cairo and Alexandria during the period under consideration. In terms of the kind of historiographical analysis we made of the sources, we actually, for reasons that will be explained, focus on the criminal cases, so the criminal records of the consular courts of Cairo and Alexandria during that period of time. These records were endangered, meaning that they were stored in an unsuitable place. So due to the unsuitability of storage facilities, they had been repatriated, like through the years, from Alexandria and Cairo back to the ASMAE. They had been stored in a basement annex in unsuitable storage conditions, so they were risking serious deterioration. And beyond that, as researchers, like through the years, I would say, we also have been experiencing huge difficulties in accessing and using these resources. Why? They were public, meaning they were not classified, okay? So they were clearly open to research. But these records were very difficult, like almost impossible to research because of a lack of a comprehensive inventory. So there was no real way for a researcher to be able to systematically analyze these sources or, you know, define some research, sort of research trails over the documents. So what we did during, like in the context of this project, was actually retrieving the sources in such a way to make them available to the researchers because of the inventory that we prepared. Now it would be very easy for a researcher to, like, basically request the materials in the reading room as they will be, researchable through the inventory, the multilingual catalog that we made available on the web platform, Web Vernacosm, will constitute the first technical output of the project. Why were we so interested in the sources? I mean, the main contention of the project is that these papers, these consular papers, are really key to the kind of historiographical revision that we want to do of the cosmopolitan period in Cairo and Alexandria. They are so rich in the way in which they can document very minute aspects of the everyday life of the people who lived in Cairo and Alexandria at that time. And this is very much what we talk about in terms of, scientific aims of the project. This is, first of all, a reconsideration of a broader scholarly debate on the meaning of cosmopolitanism and its shifting meanings and practices through times. And especially, we're interested in sorts of vernacularizing an understanding of cosmopolitanism. trying to recenter the importance of the agency of working class people, like everyday people, ordinary people, in understanding this idea of living together, like sharing, you know, the same ecosystem with other communities, and especially local, like Egyptians, local Egyptians. This clearly is more related to you know, a broader debate on the idea, the universalist idea of cosmopolitanism, how it is normally narrativized, like with an elitist perspective, as opposed to how subaltern people experience and sort of, you know, reshape or reconfigure these ideas. But of course, this also means to be an important contribution to the historiographical canon of the history of the Italian community of Egypt, which again, it's been mostly told by assuming the point of view of the elites, of the notables of the community, as opposed to the point of view of, you know, the majority of the people who were actually constituting the bulk of the community, like middle class or working class people in many cases. So we're also trying to contribute to an ongoing debate on sort of anti-nostalgic historical revision of Egyptian cosmopolitanism, recentering the importance of the historical agency of ordinary people, both foreigners and Egyptian, which is also going on at the time, like now. Like, for example, we have like a number of Egyptian historians working, you know, to recenter cosmopolitanism by, you know, Egyptianizing it to a certain extent. Okay, so really we are looking at a different kind of cosmopolitanism. A cosmopolitanism that, for example, a very important scholar, Asif Bayat, defined as everyday cosmopolitanism. We use the word which is vernacular cosmopolitanism, but I mean, these are, you know, this is debatable. I mean, there are many words probably that we might use for this. Asif Bayat writes, it is a mistake to limit cosmopolitan exchange, or the idea of cosmopolitanism, solely to the prerogative of the elites. Indeed, there is a serious need to pay scholarly attention to the cosmopolitanism of the ordinary people in their daily lives. Evidence from 20th century Cairo, Baghdad, or Aleppo suggests how, beyond the elites, the ordinary members of different religious communities, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Shiites, or Sunnis, were engaged in an intense intercommunal exchange and shared lives in the localities or at work. Sorry. So enough about vernacular cosmopolitanism. The second debate we also want to contribute to is a debate on the history of the Italian community of Egypt. Also in this case, we are contrasting the elitism of conventional historiography with a new perspective, which is clearly building on most recent subalternist approaches in the study of the Italian community, as exemplified by the work of Anthony Santilli or Costantino Paonessa, who was with us this morning. And to do this, it is using a very specific micro-historical approach. That is sifting, okay, dominant sources, like institutionally produced sources, like, for example, the papers of the Consulate that are clearly produced by an institution, like a dominant hegemonic institution. But these sources, if analyzed and read in a certain way, we would say against the grain, can also give us back, you know, glimpses of popular agency, how everyday life, normal people actually you know, moved and acted within this kind of, you know, broader structures of power, you know. This is what we've been trying to highlight in this project. So let me now break it a little bit more. I give you some historical background, but I know you know more than me, maybe. According to Italian governmental records, between 1876 and 1925 only, So only during that, span of time, 200,000 Italian nationals left the country to North Africa, with Egypt constituting the most popular trans-Mediterranean destination, in addition to Tunisia and Algeria. While the origins of the Italian community in Egypt can be traced back to the pre-unitary period, that is before 1861, when Italian advisors, for example, and instructors figured prominently within the modernist project of state and nation consolidation launched by Muhammad Ali, and after a bit, various risorgimento political dissidents found a safe haven in Egypt. Petriccioli, Rainero wrote at length about this history of the community. From the time of the opening of the Suez Canal and from the last quarter of the 19th century especially, a further migratory wave pushed thousands of working-class migrants from Italy to Egypt in search of opportunities within its economic boom. Here, Italian migrants came to compete with local, semi-skilled or casual workers with whom they greatly interacted in the workplace, in the neighborhoods, where they would live side by side, in the taverns where they were searched for leisure, where they made a home outside home. In revisiting the canonical historiography of the Italian community of Egypt, this project endeavors to explore the Italian diasporic condition, subaltern condition in Egypt, in order to demonstrate how the agency of Italian subaltern capitulary subjects, and more specifically their use from below of ethno-national legal categories under the purview of the capitulations, can help us qualify a specific type of vernacular cosmopolitanism in imperial times, therefore adding historicity to a quite a historical, abstract notion of cosmopolitanism. So on one side, we want to elaborate on the notion of cosmopolitanism beyond its most conventional elitist articulation point. By revisiting the historiography of the Italian community and proposing a post-elitist and more horizontal interpretation focusing on how working-class Italians living in Egypt negotiated their identities in relation to their communitarian institutions and through daily interactions with subaltern locals, we intend to make a broader point about the need to vernacularize the history of the cosmopolitan era in Egypt. And as I said before, in doing so, we intercept and fit in a recent Egyptian historiographical trend, not only exposing the structural invisibilization of local subjects within the Egyptian cosmopolitan historical canon, that's the work of Khalid Fahmy, Amey Hawass, among others, but also powerfully reclaiming the right of ordinary masses to the memory of the colonial and semi-colonial period. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing here, but can I have some help, please? I just need to go quickly through the very last slide. Core methodology and sources, and then I will leave the floor to the official archivist of the project. So as I've said, yes, the next one. Yes, the very last one. Yeah, no, that one, the seven, number 7. Okay, methodology and sources. So as I've said, the core methodology of the project was constituted by archival research and in-depth qualitative and quantitative analysis of a specific corpus of potentially groundbreaking sources. We believe the penal and civil cases of the consular tribunals of Cairo and Alexandria of Egypt from 1864 to 1937. So as I said before, all documents were sent back from Egypt to Italy through the years, and they've been kept in a basement in very unsuitable storage facilities and preservation condition ever since. The collection, which covers several hundred linear meters, so it is really huge, I swear, is open to the public, but it has not been inventoried so far. Researchers have been provided access sporadically. I myself got access, and it was like over the years, I did samples, and it was enough to realize both how difficult researching those papers was and the potential of it. In general, it is possible to say that these collections are virtually untapped. Therefore, the project would have potential and was ambitious because it is really meant for, making available like very unknown sources. Now, in addition to their originality, what we believe is that these papers constitute an invaluable source of knowledge about the Mediterranean and Italian diaspora in late Ottoman colonial times. More specifically, they enable the study of one Italian diasporic community in a territory subjected to the capitulations from the administrative, political, diplomatic, commercial, cultural point of view. And an extensive exploration of the multiple legal systems these people, the Italians, navigated in attending to their everyday affairs. With reference to Egypt, among the several Asmae collections and series documenting the history of the Italian community after the unification of 1861, the panel and civil consular courts papers will be key in this project. We are talking about panel cases, but each single case constitutes a sort of microcosm for the historian to explore. Every file of the consular courts contains several trials involving Italian subjects who stood accused of disparate types of felonies or crimes committed against other Italians. These are the majority of the cases, so within the community, but also committed against Egyptians or other capitulary subjects. While the nature of these sources clearly conjures up realms of highly contentious social interactions among the communities, they also depict the shared subaltern ecosystem where capitulary prerogatives could have been, indeed were, manipulated to advance strategic agendas of intra-subaltern cooperation among local and foreigners at times, if needed, if convenient. We can then plunge into the exploration of how the juridical and normative categories which were productive of liberal cosmopolitanism were appropriated and acted upon from below by subjectivities which were largely belonging to the so-called lower or marginal classes, and yet people formally endowed with the legal prerogatives of the colonial classes in the quest for survival and subsistence they shared mainly with their local counterparts. These funds represent something unique in terms of archival quantity and completeness. Their importance, therefore, is not limited to the history of the Italian community, but offers an original perspective on Egypt's contemporary history, as well as allowing the retrieval of what we consider to be an Italo-Egyptian entangled history. The history of Vernacosm, the history Vernacosm addresses is what Vernacosm wants to do, is to retrace this history as part of a broader field of transnational history, looking at how subalterns in between the two shores of the Mediterranean Sea came to inhabit and maneuver within national and, per extension, colonial categories, the unity of which their agency exceeded and at times or broken up at other times. It is a history which sort of denaturalizes, deessentializes the securitarian approach framing much of the public discourse about Mediterranean mobility nowadays. As you will see, this project also features a strong component of digital history. The final archival outputs will be freely available to the public because they will be digital and online available through a platform. The methods of digital history are strictly connected to the dissemination objectives of Vernacosm, most specifically its goal of not only easing the retrieval of a certain type of vernacular history, long time buried in the storage room of the Asmae, but actively facilitating its circulation in between the shores it both belonged to on either side of the Mediterranean Sea. Both in Egypt and Italy, a greater awareness of this history, as facilitated by further digitization of the collections, we hope, could yield significant contributions on how to rethink the genealogy of certain cartographic imagination of global north-south divide. An important aspect of the project lies in the close collaboration we foresee among historian, archivist, curator, and possibly cultural practitioners and stakeholders well beyond the scientific community. This should happen not only through a problematization of conventional understandings of elitist cosmopolitanism and the decolonization of the traditional imagery of Egyptian liberal cosmopolitism, so to speak, but through the dissemination of a different approach which looks at the everyday vernacular forms of cosmopolitanism as a lived, embodied experience of subaltern intercommunal exchange and proximity, not necessarily peaceful or ironic at all times, but it is really what I believe it is. It is a powerful means to look at the materiality and historical long durée of forms of cohabitance and circulation through the two shores, which I believe has a very important implication and relevance also for the present. So this is just to give you an idea of the kind of public impact that we foresee for this kind of clearly historiographic, like academic historiographic project. I think we sort of retrieve bits of a history which has a real relevance for rethinking, understandings of mobility and coexistence within the Mediterranean. So probably I spoke even too much. So now I stop here. I leave the floor to Costanza. She will tell you, she's the archivist of the project, and she did really an outstanding work. It was not easy to work about these sources and to make them possible to navigate as she's doing at the moment. So I leave you the floor, Costanza. So she will tell you about the archives of the Italian consulates of Cairo and Alexandria of Egypt, 1864-1937. Thank you very much.
Yes, I know. It's just that one. Just this one. I have no slides. Just that one that's presented. Okay. Okay. I'm very pleased to be here. I thank you, everyone here, to be here. And as part of the project, my responsibility was to arrange and describe, to index the documents. In short, my job was to make it possible for the group of Bernacosmo to consult the papers preserved in the archives. From September onwards, as Francesca told you, the inventory will be available to all the researchers, and I hope not only to the researchers, but also to people coming from Egypt or who lived in Egypt in the past years. Let's tell you something about the historical archive of Italy, of diplomatic archive. The historical diplomatic archive of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the institutional custodian of the documents produced by its central and peripheral offices. Unlike other ministries, which transfer the documents to the Central State Archive, the institution which is responsible for preserving the documents produced by the Central State bodies, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has its own independent separate archive. The logic behind this choice, shared by many other countries, is to preserve the confidentiality of national security documents. So the diplomatic archive has all their documents to defend the national interest. The historical diplomatic archives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs contains the paper of its central office, that means the secretariat, the cabinet of the ministry central administration and their articulation, and those of its peripheral offices. That means the Italian legation as well as consular abroad. It also holds the documents of the former Ministry for Italian Africa. In recent decades, the papers of diplomats and personalities have been required. The documentary corpus in this way, provides information for the study of international relations and for the in-depth study of relation and analysis of form of assistance to numerous national community abroad. So, the Egyptian papers, let's see the Egyptian papers. The Egyptian papers are an example of the richness and continuity of the Italian archives guaranteed by the Italian Preservation Institution in their articulation. From the beginning of the 20th century, the Italian consulates were required to transfer in the newly created historical diplomatic archives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs the outdated documents that, due to the lack of space in consular offices and legation abroad, were in danger or being damaged, if not dispersed. In Rome, at the same time, as the structuring and the articulation of offices dedicated to activities and the search of physical spaces to be allocated for conservation, there was a growing interest in old documents and an awareness of the possibility of using them not only for political and administrative reasons, but also for study and research. So that means that at the beginning of the 20th century, it starts the research of a researcher, and they're coming and asking papers to study. Okay, that's a big change. Until that moment, they ask a paper just for administrative use. The earliest transfer of Egyptian documents in the historical diplomatic archives date back to the first decades of the 90s and concern documentation of the pre-unification consulates. The Consulates General of Kingdom of Sardinia, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany and Sicily had been established in Alexandria since the 1820s. In Cairo, vice-consulates, delegation, and chancelleries supported the activities of the Consul General stationed in Alexandria. So the consul was in Alexandria, and the vice-consulates were in Cairo. So the very important consulate was here in Alexandria. With the reunification of the consular services in the 1860s, these papers were transferred to the Italian consulates in Alexandria and in Cairo. Gradually, through sedimentation, they were joined by the later, very rich documentation that is the subject of Werner Cosmo research, as well as arrangement and inventory. So we are speaking of the papers after 1860s, but the ministry has also the documentation of the years before, which is important, but it gives continuity, okay? So the extraordinary case of this documentation, it's that is a documentation that lasts more than 100 years, because it started in 1820s and it finished, we are studying until the 1939. So you can imagine that is more than 120 years, which is really rare, because the documentation substantially is complete. There are, for certain type of documentation, there are not that big gaps that we could imagine. And that helped us to rebuild many kind of things, because Francesca spoke about the documentation, of course, but for certain subjects we can study a lot of subjects, okay? But let's see what was the initial state of archival funds. The consular archives in Cairo and Alexandria are preserved in the repository archives of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as we said. The papers of the two archives are stored separately in two different locations, but in the same room. A rough estimate is that there are at least 1,800 pieces. That means volumes and boxes. You must imagine that those boxes are not very little. I mean, some of them, it's about like that. That means that what normally one piece is about 3, okay? So it's really a big mass of documentation we can see on those shelves. And at the beginning, when I get in, I was a little bit afraid because it seemed really messy, okay? Because as you can imagine, this documentation arrived in different moments. For the documentation of Alexandria, the papers arrived in 1970s, and they arrived all together, okay? It was about 1,000 pieces that arrived in one moment. And the peculiar thing was that those documentation arrived all in a time, in once. Instead of what happened generally about every 20 years, okay? The transfer generally are programmed, okay? Differently, it was sent all together. So the documentation of the course was nearly ordered. The consulate, before to send the documentation, made a big work, a very exceptional work. They tried to put together all the files. They put together with strings and sent them with lists to the ministry. The problem was with the other documentation, especially the correspondence, because the correspondence was kept preserved on the shelves from so many years. You mean you had the documentation from the 1860 on, and they had difficulty in the 70s to understand what the consulate did before. So they put them in big boxes, even not understanding very well what was in. And this is a little problem also for me, because once I started looking at them, I had big difficulties. And certainly we are finishing this job in a few months, but it takes too long time because we have very near documentation of different periods. The situation was very different for Cairo documentation. The Cairo documentation arrived of the consulate, obviously, we were still speaking about that, arrived in Italy in different times. The first things arrived in 1912, and after we had the transfer on the 20s, 30s, 50s, 70s, etc. And that makes the archive more richer. So we can find the court documents, I mean the files of criminal and civil cases, as well as something else. We have, for example, we have so many teachers of the school. We have, for example, the documentation of the school, which is very interesting. It's the administrative, obviously, papers. So we have the names of the teachers, what they received for their come si dice, stipendi, for work. Okay. And what else? We have what they spent to buy books and materials for the schools. So we can have some idea, really consistent idea of what happened in the school, okay? And what they did. that's really interesting. But as well as this, I have also documentation of conscription. So we have the registers where people were inscribed at the especially during the First War. So we have the names of the people who lived here that were called by the military to go to service, as well as some documentation about nationality. About nationality, there is not a lot. I mean, I expected to find more things. I expected to find files about the nationals, because naturally every Italian people had a file that helped the consul to decide if he had the right to the protection. As you know, we are speaking about a period where there were the capitulation. Obviously, to be protected was really important. And the consul had the duty to verify if the people had the protection. So as you can imagine, there are a number of researches that can be enormous, because you can study a lot of things on this kind of documentation. So certainly the documentation of the courts is really important, because it's exhaustive, very complete, and overall is enormous. I want to give you some number so you can understand what I'm speaking about. Let me wait a minute. There are about hundreds. We are speaking about hundreds. 200 folders for penal or civil courts, both of Cairo and Alexandria, as well as sentences. We are volumes, 50 or 60 or 30 volumes of sentences, as well as notarial deeds, which are very important, because through the deeds we can rebuild the history of the families. And another series which is really important is the series of the successions. It's important to have an idea of what the people who lived here had and what left to their heirs, okay? Obviously, it depends on the main activities of the consul. The main consular activities are aimed at protecting the Italian nation, as you know, in the broadest sense, and promoting economic and cultural activities. Through close relation with the national and local authorities, the consulate's role is to monitor the nation and provide assistance to Italian citizens. The administrative activities are aimed at knowing and supporting the community, civil status, notarial activities, assistance to private individuals, the education through the funding of Italian school, and the fulfillment of citizens' duties as military service. So you understand that those are the duties, and the papers are depend on that. In Egypt, there was also the judicial function mentioned above. Institutional data, therefore, provide the framework within which the management of activities take place and allows it to be understood. So, what my work? How did all this work? What helped me were the lists that arrived in Italy with the papers, as well as a consultation of the main contemporary guides, both Italian and international, to to understand the correct handling of consular affairs and relation between consulates. And of course, studies on the system of capitulations. All of them have proved useful. They make it possible to study consular affairs in depth, to identify, know, and recognize the type of documents in the context of the various administrative procedures, to anticipate their existence. Guides, instruction, and commentaries on regulations are also useful in all these cases, which are not exceptional, in which the handling of consular affairs is governed by practice rather than rights rules. An understanding of the main legal proceedings, both civil and criminal, referred to in the individual files, is also functional for the identification of useful and necessary elements for a correct archival filing. That's a second point. Which are the elements that I used to describe the documentation, especially for the criminal and civil files? I generally used the names. The names are the first key to find the papers, because for every file I choose to put inside the description the names, the kind of affairs, as well as the dates. I describe when there are photographs, and as well as journal. So in this way, we can navigate through the papers. And I hope in this way it will be possible in future for all of you, as well as scholars like Francesca and Costantino, to navigate in their archives. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We have a break.
Break now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a break for half an hour, coffee break, and we're back to listen to Dr. Costantino Paonessa. Thank you. About to start. So let me welcome Dr. Costantino Paonessa, please.
شكرا، ما عملتش حاجة يعني. السلام عليكم. Good morning, bonjour, buongiorno. I want to thank all the persons that organize this event. عايز أشكر منظمين المؤتمر. معلش أنا زي الكونسول يعني كنت عاوز بكلمهم بالإيطالي بس يعني في الآخر بكلمه بالإنجليزي واللهجة بتاعي مش كويسة قوي بالإنجليزي معلش يعني بس يعني أنا برضو عاوز أشكر الناس اللي موجودة. فرانشيسكو غريكو معلش هو مش موجود دلوقتي بس أنا عرفته من زمان، وفرانشيسكو موناكو برضو يعني معلش اللي هم مش موجودين. فعاوز أشكر برضو يعني المدرسين من الدومبوسكو والطلاب أكيد اللي موجودين بقى بس يعني معلش أنا بتكلم بالإنجليزي أكيد عاوز بشكر برضو المترجم يعني الدكتور شكرا حبيبي. One of the main achievements of the Vernacosm project is to put the focus on the interest on the reflection on the contrast between lived reality and historical narrative. In particular, in the depth study of criminal proceedings, Sorry, I want to, okay. No. Is that, where is the, how?
It's there,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the pointer.
Yeah, so?
Gambek.
Okay, هنا, okay. شكرا. Okay, بس في برضه هنا. Okay, شكرا. In particular, in the deep study of criminal proceedings held in the consular courts of Cairo and Alexandria, has opened a window onto a series of microhistories that have long gone untold. These are stories of the ordinary, what Dostoevsky called memories from the underground, that rarely find a place in diplomatic reports or mainstream historical accounts. In recent years, scholars from diverse disciplinary backgrounds have drawn attention from various perspectives to the significant historiographical gaps that still characterize the history of the Italian colonies in Egypt. I use the word colony, jalia in Arabic, in line with official Italian documents, newspapers, and publications that commonly use this term. Ever since the second half of the 19th century, the Italian colony in Egypt was taken hostage by the historical narrative of its past, which imposed a dominant vision of events that in time became hegemonic. Diplomats, politicians, scholars, and publicists of the liberal and fascist era, and more recently, communitary institutions and associations, have all clearly, for different reasons that will be not go into here, have all tried to make a trophy of the past of the Italian colony in Egypt, what we say in Italian, valore rifugio, in which it is elevated to cult status at certain ceremonies. More specifically, what most new scholars have highlighted in their studies is a general lack of focus on the subaltern and marginalized classes that also represent some of the people who reached the Mediterranean and, in our specific case, Egypt, like the photo that you can see here. More specifically, what most new scholars have, this is a topic, the subaltern people, that has been kept quiet, dismissed, and in some cases censored. Although they have been referred to and remembered within the context of the events recounted in consular dispatches, the microcosm of Italian subalterns, marginals, only come into view in certain circumstances, and only in the background of what is considered to be the main subject. The question we must ask ourselves is, who are these people? What is their history? What role did they play in the history of the Italian colony in Egypt? The history of Italian migration to Egypt and its evolution is fairly well known. Excluding the presence of several Levantine families whose origins date back to the centuries before Napoleonic occupation, the migration to Egypt of people from Italia Peninsula, not Italy, occurred at particular times. General data on Italian migration shows shows that Italian migration to Africa was a less significant phenomenon compared to emigration overseas and to the rest of Europe. Nevertheless, Italian emigration to Africa represents an important element for understanding the nature and evolution of a relationship between Italy and Africa, a relationship that is, of course, part of the broader context of relations between Europe and the Africa continent. The first wave of migration to Egypt occurred before 1848 and was very variable and difficult to quantify. But the number was estimated by Federico Amici Bay at 60,000 in 1820 and by Clot Bay at 2,000 in 1840. In the second, more important wave of migration, the result of political stability in Egypt, and particularly the cotton boom, the number of foreigners in Egypt increased by tens of thousands. In 1871, there were 10,000 Italians in the country. A third-long period of migration took place between the time of British occupation in 1892 and the establishment of the fascist regime in Italy in 1930. The largest number of arrivals came in two periods, between 1897 and 1807, and the latter between 1817 and 1827. Lastly, a final period of influx ended in 1837, when Italians came to make the 25% of foreign population. The Montreux Convention, which ended the capitulation system and the outbreak of the World War II, put an end to Italian immigration to Egypt, except some group, and marked the start of the return, repatriation, or exile between the end of the World War II and 1861. A diachronic reading of this figure might justify the complex social makeup of the colonial community, which was clearly influenced by the background of its members, the conditions of their settlement, and the reasons of their departure. As is easily understood, the opening of the Suez Canal played a crucial role in transforming the composition of the Italian population in Egypt. Thanks to new demand in the labor market as a result of the new urban conglomerations and port facilities, thousands of migrants from less developed regions of Italy and Europe, especially Greece and Malta, but also from the Middle East and North Africa, sought to make their fortune in the country, il paese della cuccagna. In 1905, the diplomatic agent in Cairo, Salvagoraggi, referred to a segment of the Italian population present in Alexandria and Cairo like plebeian. Leaning on historical reconstruction and analyzing archive sources that had been mostly or completely unexplored, that Costanza have explained us, the objective is to shake, the objective of our project is to shake the certainties handed down to us under the authority of historiographical and memorialist traditions. The aim is to propose another narrative of the history of Italian colony in Egypt, which though the specific nature of the discipline of history, the relationship with time, the events, the context, and the international conjuncture, places the spotlight on the complexity of individual and collective social relations. The Verne team selected 4 years considered particularly significant for the study. The 1882-1883 years marking the beginning of British colonization in Egypt, the 1900 a symbolic turning point, the 1811 the year marking the beginning of Italian colonization in Libya, and 1827 when the fascist Italian regime consolidated its power in the colonies of Cairo and Alexandria, but also the year of the sensational assassination of Sikurel in Cairo. I have incorporated some data previously collected from a 1901 criminal court records in Cairo into this study. The decision to focus exclusively on criminal cases, why criminal cases, is based on 2 main reasons. One, on the one hand, a circumstantial constraint linked to the quality of documents actually accessible during the project's duration. We have just 2 years. On the other hand, a scientific reasons, insofar as criminal trials, by their very nature, provide a privileged entry point to deploy to deeply examine the dynamics of everyday relationship in the working class neighborhoods of Cairo and Alexandria. Who are these underlings whose traces emerge whose subaltern, whose traces emerge in the criminal archives of Egypt's consular courts? Every file at the consular court of Cairo and Alexandria contains hundreds of thousands of trials involving Italian subjects. Fighting, theft, wounding, insult and verbal injury, resisting to local police, plundering, acts of indecency, pimping, sexual assault and rape, feminicide, murder. In a very general way, the documents of these courts contained in a criminal trials are composed of 3 parts. A complaint file by the injured party, an investigation conducted by the Egyptian police or the Egyptian consulate or the consul, and finally the verdict, the judgment. It is generally worth remembering that these 3 parts were not necessarily connected. The vast majority of complaints, the first one, never resulted in a trial, the last one. Each of the 3 parts contains information about the parties involved, like here, no? Such as personal detail, the names, the works, the address in Egypt and in Italy, and some data. Factual data, but also factual data like the narrative, no, of the facts, and linguist elements. The information forms the basis for the historians. All those informations forms the basis for the historian's quantitative and qualitative analysis. Looking at the statistic, okay? From some of the years examined in the context of the Vernacosm trial, it became clear that crime rate remained relatively stable over the time. You have some change, but normally in general, you have the main percentage. With only minor fluctuations. It is important to note that some of these misdeeds were committed against members of other community, like I show you here, for example, other nationalities, okay? Many against Egyptian subjects, and the majority against Italian citizens. Trials involving non-Italian individuals consistently represent less than 30% of the total. I don't have, okay. Here you can see better. By addressing conflictual relationships, individual, family, neighborhood, and social tensions, trials allow for a more complete reconstruction of the social history of the Italian colony of Egypt from a subaltern point of view. Judicial records, police investigation, interrogation records, trial records provide all useful data to reconstruct basic characteristics of the population, demographic trends, and social structures, name, gender, place, and date of birth, marital status, profession, place of residence. Here, I don't have the number of the, for example, okay, you can see here the gender of defendants, or who are the complainants, yeah, like some statistics, okay? The statistics clearly show the vast majority of crimes were committed by men, okay? However, it is also important to consider the data of women, as behind these numbers lie the lives of individuals whom history had forgotten. Who are these women? What are their life history? Why are they involved in criminal proceedings? Are the questions like historian I ask. The analysis can also delve into the origins of the excited like that. An interesting finding is that the overwhelming majority of crimes were committed within the Italian community. In 1801, at least, a large majority of the Italians involved came from south of Italy, for example. It's a data. If we instead consider regional origin, most of the Italians come from southern of Italy. In this regard, one piece of data I did not expect is the presence of a Calabria, a very important Calabria community, for example, both in Cairo and Alexandria. It is not a coincidence then, like Yolanda Cristina Giotti, better known as Dalida, was born in Shobra, and her parents came from Serra Stretta, a small town in province of Catanzaro, a little city in the south of Italy. A quantitative reading of the data highlights the significant presence of violence within the two colony of this is some data of two Italian colonies in Egypt. This finding confirms, at least in part, the concerns already resided in consular reports sent to the government in Rome. The diplomatic archives are full on numerous and persistent reports from British and Egyptian authorities to Italian institutions, denouncing disturbances in which the ringleaders were Italian subjects. Even the literary and autobiographical works like Enrico Pea, Fausto Cialente, Giuseppe Ungaretti, Anna Messina, Roberto D'Angiò, Romolo Garbati, each speaks about the extreme variety in the behavior of a numerous and socially different community. Certainly, I believe it's important to clarify this before it's pointed out to me. All that not concern the full Italian population in Egypt, nor can we say that all those we classify as subalterns have committed crimes, of course. However, it is an important reality that deserves to be highlighted as it offers valuable insights for thought. In particular, I think two issues are important. The first concerns the history of the Italian colony in Egypt, both in terms of the historiographical revision from scholars and the contribution it offers to rethinking the relationship between mass migration and colonialism, as well as the broader history of all Italian colonialism. The second concerns the redefinition of the history of the cosmopolitanism in the global cities of Cairo and Alexandria during the colonial era, from the point of view of a micro-level reconstruction of the forms of the inter-community coexistence in their everyday life. A perspective that is intentionally framed from the Italian point of the view. What emerges from the documents consulted so far? The arrival of tens of thousands of migrants from Europe and other parts of the world. I show you another, like that. But also of a large rural population from the second half of 19th century onwards contributed to profound change in the demographic, economic, and social fabric of Egypt's major cities, mainly Alexandria, Cairo, Suez, and Port Said. Exactly as in other so-called global cities of the time, New York, Boston, or Rio de Janeiro, I don't know, in Argentina, the demographic mix, for me, a more accurate way of defining vernacular cosmopolitanism in urban context often marked by poverty and deprivation, inevitably brings within both cooperation and conflict. Social science indeed suggests that a particular high level, like here, social science indeed suggests that a particularly high level of demographic diversity can make it difficult to establish a climate of trust and mutual understanding among residents of a given area, thereby increasing the risk of conflict, of course. And even when interactions between people of different origins are not initially framed or perceived as interethnic, disagreements can become ethnicizated over time, either during the conflict itself or retrospectively. In contrast to the idea of an elitist European literate nostalgic cosmopolitanism referenced by the scholar Halley, everyday coexistence in Cairo and Alexandria appeared as something far more complex, where people from diverse social, economic, and cultural backgrounds shared common space and resources with a global and within a global and a regional context shaped by European colonial and imperial expansion. Within this framework, national and ethnic identities both competed with and complemented other factors functioning as agents of differentiation and exerting a significant influence on people's everyday lives. I hope that Vernacosm is only the beginning of a series of projects focused on this subject, the interacting relations, moving beyond the Italian perspective to integrate and compare it with other contexts and perspectives. Merci, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Constantino. Now we have half an hour of questions and answers.
Egypt was, unfortunately, a British colony, but we were never an Italian colony. And I checked again to my understanding, so the term colony might change the history, you know, because we don't say colony, we say community, we say other things than that. I'm really very sorry, but I had to comment about that. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can gather some questions, like we bundle them together if there are more than one, and then we respond, or do you want us to go like one each single question at a time? Okay, we can start from here. Yeah.
We can go one by one.
Yes, one by one. So on the issue of, okay, this is a very important question, first of all. So thank you so much for posing it, because it gives us the opportunity, I think, to distinguish a bit about the terminology. No, I mean, I believe that, yeah, that we also had discussions about this. I mean, actually, we use it colony, like the Italian colony, right? Because it is basically the kind of, working term as it is appearing in the archival sources. And that's because clearly there was like a specific type of what we could term as, migratory politics, right? So the Italian kingdom, like the Kingdom of Italy at that time, was also like part of its, let's say, external projection in terms of power, like, also happened through the management of these group of, for example, I use also the term diasporic Italian groups over the basin of the Mediterranean, right? So migrant politics meant that the presence of Italians, like Italian subjects abroad, would play a role in the, in the foreign policy of the Italian kingdom. And so clearly the term colony was used to mean that, there was an external, like that Italy would legitimately claim to have a stake in local politics somewhere else because of the presence of an Italian colony. To me, I would use community. I would use, I mean, I could think of, you know, community, diaspora, diasporic communities, because clearly there's this sense of, you know, dispersion. But really here it's been used mostly, and then I don't know if Costantino agrees with that, but to me, this is like a very important point to debate, because to me, I mean, in terms of, in fact, I use intercommunal relations, not even interethnic, but intercommunal to say, you know, to stress this aspect that you also mean. But clearly here it is used as a colony because it is mainly the use of the sources. This is how it appears in the sources, and clearly it expresses a political point made by the authorities themselves. And therefore, that was a colony, because then you could legitimately claim a control over those people, and these people would use also, the institution of the colony was used as a conduit of power. And then, of course, that was also in competition with, you know, other foreign communities, and of course, like, there was like a different balance of, like, that happened in a very complex balance of power also among the different communities.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to...
It's really a precious presentation, and thank you very much, but that's the only...
I have...
No, we used it like
I
literally.
It's only a term. It doesn't
Can I ask you, how do you translate Jalia?
Not colony.
Okay. Now you can find also the colony meaning in the translation of the Jalia, because you don't use Jamia for community. It's not the same word in Arabic.
Yeah,
you can use Jama, and you don't use it.
You said in Arabic Jalia, you didn't say you didn't say Mustawar. You said Jalia.
Yeah, I think there is a problem. No, I think there is a difference between the British colony with army and another kind of colony that is a colony but without army.
No, but I'm not really... Yeah, but at the very basic level, I mean, I think we also, like, at least in the narrative today, it really reproduces the term that you find in the archives, like in the documents produced by the institutions. Yeah, it's also much more expensive. Yeah.
I agree with you. بجد أنا معك يعني بس.
No, I mean, I just give you an example.
في فرق بين جامع and جالية. في فرق.
I'm going to that. Yes, but again, okay, but it is it compares like as colony in the sources, and I give you one example for, and actually this use of the term colony, the Italian colony in the sources, okay, produced by the Italian institutions there, increases over time. For example, after the beginning, like after fascism, when they call it the colony, turns into a full-fledged fascist colony, this idea of the colony is very much present there, and it clearly used as a discursive strategy for, you know, foreign policy. That's a colony, that's not a community, it's a colony, that's Italy there, okay? And it is very clear when you, for example, go through many cases. I mean, I worked, more specifically, I took care of some specific cases, files, based on, like, revolving around the issue of expulsions, like undesirable people, like people living in the community, I would say, that got expelled from the colony, they would say, because of many reasons, especially for acts that were like immoral acts, things that were considered to be a stain on the honor of the colony. So after fascism, you also see very much this idea of using, you know, the discourse of morality to discipline subaltern agency. And in fact, many people were actually kicked out because they were near to the wells. I mean, kind of unruly, but not really for any kind of moral, you know. So that was used as an excuse mostly. Okay, this is what I wanted to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. On this side, we can discuss about what was the Phoenician colonies or the Greek colonies in antiquity, which doesn't mean that they were taking power of it. It's most likely people who travel and install themselves without the agreement, without the state behind them.
Exactly.
So it's more like a colony in the sense of ancient colonies. That would make sense. I mean, that's a whole discussion. There would be a whole conference about it. I was, of course, and the wall is very interesting, and really want to go deeper into the data that you have, because it looks very fantastic what you bring together. What I found very interesting is the way that you discuss both Alexandria and Cairo, and I have the sense that there is an hermetic discussions between Alexandria and Cairo most of the times, like Alexandria being considered as the city of cosmopolitanism, and Cairo a lot less. And usually people are studying Cairo or they're studying Alexandria, but most of the people don't study both. So in your studies, what you would say as the main difference in your archives, because you see the numbers looks different, how you feel that there is a difference, how the Italian community is treated, how they think themselves in the country, in the archive that you have.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, yes, there is a very big difference between Alexandria and Cairo. I didn't have the time to do these statistics, but yeah, the social composition of the two communities is different. It's very different, because Alexandria, you have, for example, a lot of crimes, economic crimes, like in the market, all that. And then there is also, I think, the Italian community is in Alexandria is more rich, for example, than Cairo. And of course, and then I think also, yeah, if we think about the migration, like I think the Italian person go to the Cairo, it's different. I think very subaltern from the very popular class. Yeah. But I don't have data now. It's in the future. I will do that, of course.
Maybe this is something that we want to narrow down a little bit. Meaning that in the course of the project really began with Constanza's work, going into the deposit, taking stock of all the sources, trying to find, the listed diversamento, that is reconstructing the actual original structure of the archives, like how the documents had been, brought back and put there. So that meant that really we didn't have these at the beginning of the project. So we did samples once again, as we did in the past in our individual research before, because, that amorphous mass of materials was there, and Costanza was working 24/7 basically to try to, to reconstruct the structure of the archives. But we could do a sample, because, the inventor, like the retrieval and inventoring part of the work was actually happening at the same time. So we did a sample. We have that very preliminary findings that we communicated today. But I would like to point out that we really think that it is now that the exciting part of the work starts, because now we can actually we have a much better knowledge of what's there, so we can start to go into the details. And there are many research lines that can open up, and this is really an invitation to researcher to kind of try to get familiar with the sources, and then I think for coming years there will be a lot of work to do. So it's really a sort of pivot work that we did.
We have, for example, a lot of documents in Arabic. If you,
and there's also
there is some students who want to translate. He's welcome, of course. Yeah.
Yes. Microphone.
Thank you very much. Back to this problematic of terminology. I think you have said جامعة. No, it's جمعية. Not, yes, not جامعة. جامعة is but there is a magic word in Arabic, طائفة. طائفة is the right word for this. طائفة اليونانية, طائفة الإنجليزية. My question is, we had Angalia too, right? How they were working together. We have many nationalities, Malta and French, and of course the majority were Greeks here, the first one. How did they work together? There was a kind of competition in trading, in commerce, in power, whatever. And I have asked this question to many of the high members of the Italian community. Why fascism was integrated in the Italians, both in Cairo and Alexandria, especially in Alexandria. I was a child and I entered many houses. I found the head of Mussolini in a small table in the corner, in many houses. Why this? Thank you. Especially in Alexandria.
Yeah, of course, I'm sorry. I said Jama, but I want to say Jim, Mim, Ein, la racine. Why we don't use this racine? Okay. And the second question is the fascist. I don't know why. I think there is political reasons. No, of course the Italian community was a very different community in contrast to the other communities in the world, because capitulation. Yeah, it was more simple from the fascist to fascists the community. Okay, and for this reason is and because the consul was also the how I say, the director of the police, the Italian police, the control of the Italian population, it was simple. Yeah. And then there is also the colonial politics of the fascism in Italy that changed a lot, no? And Egypt is for fascism, but also for the liberal Italian government, Crispin, Giolitti, and that. It was like the door for the colonization of Africa, because Suez. If you see at the map, the Italian colonies was in Somalia, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. And of course, Suez is the door to go to the Red Sea and then to go to make a war in Africa. And for that, this is the importance of the Italian communities of Egypt. Okay. I don't know if I answered your question.
In Alexandria, he's Italian. He told me Italian where it was like prosperity and richness. So yeah, in Arabic he told me كنا متدلعين في اسكندرية. So it's a trend with the local. Now actually the term now. It was a trend to be a fascist. It's like Masonic. Masonism was a fashion. It's the same thing.
I think it's different because the Masonic, it's a group. Fascism is a government. Yeah, there is a difference between the Masonry, it's a very small group, a society, and the Italian government. For this reason, maybe, and then maybe you talk with a high class member of the Italian community. Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you for the lecture. Actually, I'm a tour guide and I do cultural tours, you know, walking in the streets of Alexandria, and that's part of my interest. So actually, it is the data I heard today. It's very important to know, you know, like the outlines, how to do the research, the percentage, very important. But actually, what I have, it's more request than a question. Actually, I was curious to know more stories. I mean, you've been talking about crimes and percentage and more men than women and more, you know, crime, you know, such a things. I was actually curious to know more stories. Actually, that's, you know, for my field, this is what the tourists want to hear. Plus, I do work with you know, sometimes Greeks or Italians. They're coming to visit their parents and grandparents, you know, houses, schools, stuff, things. So I remember one day I attended a lecture. They were talking about the Greek community. They were talking about the crimes and things like that. So they were talking about a famous criminal. He was, you know, running from Egypt to Greece, and there were communication and cooperation between Egypt and Greece to capture this. And they captured him in Greece, and they sent him to Egypt. So, I mean, I don't want to talk a lot, but I mean, such a story is very interesting to know. I mean, today it's like the outlines or the introduction. You know, that's what I feel. And really, really, I'm curious to know more stories, more also social stories. You know, if there is a kind of like cooperation or partnership between, you know, Italian community and Egyptian communities. This is number one. The other request, you've been talking about the archive and researches field. So I'm an Egyptian, as an Egyptian, am I allowed to use this kind of data or archive? So, because when I was in a master degree, I made a research, and it was especially about the Italian architecture influence in Alexandria architecture. It was just, you know, the most of my data was oral. You know, I had a problem documenting, you know, finding text. So mainly it depends upon oral stories. So I wish, or I need to know the way how I can, you know, contact or use the data and the archive and such things. I'm sorry for long thing.
I can,
yes, you can
answer.
if you want to
The first one is about the histories. Yeah, of course, stories in general. Yes, of course. I'm so sorry because my English, but in general, I have like each year maybe there is maybe 200 trials, and each trials is a story. If you want, I can talk with you all day, all the day.
There are already many interesting stories.
And the problem
is
is also, I think we will write a book or editing a book together, of course. But yeah, there is a lot of histories to talk. Yeah, and if you want, yeah, we can speak after. And of course, there is also a problem because I think the criminal histories are so fascinating, but not all data. It's better to. It's good to say, you know, because yeah.
Privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story about? Gliele vuoi raccontare tu le storie delle tre signore, dei due signori?
No, but you worked on those stories. I don't know them.
Ma io in inglese.
Okay, I can translate if you want.
For example, I have two photos of two women victims of their. I showed the two photos of this woman, yeah, and yeah, they had they was a victim of their husbands, for example. Yeah, we have this kind of history, and I don't know, but for example, there is a lot of history of the third photo. It was a Libyan Italian during the fascism, after the colonization of Libya. We have thousands of Libyan Italian stayed here in Alexandria, for example. And why we have this information? Because a lot of these persons worked in the drugs traffic, for example, and within the Italian, of course. And then we have a lot of history in the building, for example, in neighborhood or that. We have a lot of car incidents. We have a lot of fighting between Egyptian police and Italian people, and we have also a lot of injuries when. For example, there is a lot of sentences, it's not polite to say now, from Italian against the Egyptian police, of course. This is the problem, because
so the point is, can I say something?
Yeah.
No, like using, improper sentences was a crime at the time. This is very interesting.
Of course, because you can go to the police to say, he said to me that if you are a police here now and you go in the street and you say something to a policeman, it's a crime, of course. Yeah.
So now, for example, you have so many different stories. Some of them are very sort of impressive because they're so detailed, and this is fascinating in itself. But then, of course, and this is something that, for example, you didn't want to focus on this morning, but in order to use them, you should be able to still frame them in some sort of broader analysis, like, for example, insults, hidden scripts or vernacular. I mean, there's a whole literature about cursing in cosmopolitan environments, how, certain register, like language register, are used in relation to social belonging, So this is something, for example, through this source, you could also explore, like the use of insults, the use of language, as it was diffused among communities, like from below, okay, how they would address each other, for example, by studying like real life incidents, or events,
Of course, I think it's not the majority of the. When we have the point of view from the criminal, documents. Of course, it's not all the community, all the people of the community. Of course, we are working on criminals. Trials.
Yeah, but then again, what you like as an institution, what you construct as a crime might be, subaltern agency from below. Like someone who's not intending to commit a crime is just, wanted to get by, okay? And then, of course, it falls within, the remit of the authorities, because it's this kind of subaltern agency is considered by institutions or, institutions of order and discipline as crime. That's very Foucauldian, that's the idea. For example, what you can explore through these archives is, again, intercommunitarian relations in terms of, relationships like between men and women. So, for example, we have many stories about Italian men, Egyptian women. And then you can see how some, cultural norms are played out there, like, in the encounters between real-life men and women. Family relations, what was going on inside these families, okay? Clearly you have some, once again, dominant notions of decorum within the family, within society. You normally see that, again, families were in many cases like kind of shattered, or these dominant ideas of the family as a core institution of the nation state really is called into question when you see actually the meaning of family within this subaltern context. Men and women, they would leave each other very much often because someone was not taking care of the other husband, of the other partner, because of sheer poverty. Okay. So these are, I think this kind of story could work, but this is subaltern history, or history from below in general, clearly. They really work as a counterpoint to dominant, hegemonic narratives about, society in general. And I believe these sources can be very interesting. I mean, I worked within this kind of framework previously, not on the, and now I hope to be able to work more, because as I said before, I did samples randomly. I wouldn't even be able to order the things that I wanted to order because there was no index in the archives. And then I go to your second question: are they available? Yes, for example, you were also asking about forms of cooperation between subalterns belonging to different communities. This is something that I explored in these archives in my previous work about the social history of sex work in Cairo, okay, between 1880 to 1952, and I found so many instances of joint ventures between Italian subjects in Cairo and Egyptians, so where Italians would lease some clandestine brothel premises in their own names, so that these premises would not be amenable to police authorities. I mean, of course, if you were owner of the place, the police, as an Italian or a Greek or a Maltese, the Egyptian parquet, couldn't just, when they were doing, they were raiding the Azbekiyya, for example, they wouldn't be able to enter these premises because they were leased in the name of a foreign subject protected by the capitulation. So, in the meantime, the police is there, and then you need to call the consular authorities to come and check the situation. In the meantime, all the people in the house, like the prostitutes and the clients, they are gone, obviously. So you would have Egyptian, also hashish dens. So many Egyptians were, running these places, but they would ask Italians to lease the premises in their own names so that they could easily get away with the police. And in fact, why Italians were also so active in all these trades is because they were capitulary subjects. So, of course, we all know that the capitulary judicial system was very lenient when it came to Europeans, right? So they could do basically whatever illicit and profitable, knowing they would get away very easily. And so these are the kinds of stories, but then, of course, you need to frame them some more broadly, in a more broad way. And then, yes, of course, they would be available to you because public archives are public, okay? So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is open to any researchers. Of course, you need to file for, you make an application, but it's very routine. Then you get it's not even security clearance. You get approved based on a short description of your research proposal, and these documents will be open to the public. Everyone would be able to see them. So, as it should be. Yes.
أنا سؤالي بالعربي. أنا بس كنت عايز أعرف المحاكم القنصلية اللي كانت موجودة في الوقت ده، طبيعة الأحكام بتاعتها اللي كانت بتصدر كانت بتبقى مرضية للطرفين سواء مجني عليه وجاني، لأن المحاكم القنصلية دي كانت بتنظر القضايا الجنائية. الأمر التاني اللي عايز أعرفه طريقة التنفيذ، كان بيتنفذ على أرض مصر ولا كان بيتنفذ في إيطاليا مثلا، أو لو في أي دولة تانية بتنفذ على أرضها؟ شكرا.
No, c'est autre chose. No, c'est another thing. I think there is the mixed court, okay, it's for only from civil law and commercial law. From the penal case, the Italian was judged on the base of the Italian penal code, not Egyptian penal code. Okay, because the extraterritorial jurisdiction, you know, if all that for the capitulation, you know, it's not the Egyptian penal code, but the Zanardelli penal code, Italian under the liberal era, and Rocco, I think, penal code during the fascism. Yeah, and the judge was the consul. If you was arrested, you can stay here in Egypt, but the consul paid for the prisons, or you are expelled to Italy. It's like that, but on the base of the Italian code. It's the capitulation. For this reason, there is an ambiguity on the meaning of the word colony. Because that.
An European prison, but then they were expelled.
Yeah. If you come in Italian, we judge you on the base of the Italian law, not Egyptian law. You know, this is the problem of the extraterritoriality from the capitulation. Until 1937, yeah, of course. And Italian, French, other communities was against the British plan to abolish the capitulation.
So the British wanted to abolish the capitulation because as a de facto colonial power in the country, like, you know, their protectorate, whatever, but still, they were in charge of public order as well. So all these, you know, criminal acts like these things going on, that was a problem, there was a sure problem of public order and discipline. So the British were against the capitulations because the capitulations actually made very difficult to have public order in the country, you know, because many crimes left unattended by the consuls. So the British were against, right? Okay, the British were against the capitulations. But all other communities, they wanted to retain the capitulations because it was a way for them to still play a role within the politics of the country, which, by the way, was an Egyptian country. So yes, but one more thing maybe to make this difference more clear. Now we're talking about penal cases. So crimes involving, you know, like people belonging to different communities, they were dismembered in as many sub-cases as the nationalities of the people involved in the crimes. Okay, so now we're talking about Italians, so clearly crimes made by Italians towards Italians or others, they were judged by the consuls because they were penal cases. Non-penal cases, meaning civilian cases, involving Italians and other subjects, they were transferred to the mixed tribunals, okay? So that was, again, another thing. But here, we don't have mixed tribunals, okay? Because clearly they were, right?
The mixed courts probably are in Egypt.
The mixed courts must be, the documents of the mixed courts are in Egypt. I'm not able to tell you where they are.
We don't know where they are.
In the Court of Appeal of Alexandria.
They have all the cases from the beginning of the mixed court till
Yes, because clearly the mixed tribunal. Yeah, okay. So it's here in Alexandria.
Must be here.
Not in Daramafza.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And the composition of the mixed court was mixed because there was judge from different nationalities. Okay. But in this case, we have a chance to have these archives because it was the tribunal council, the tribunal was under the authority of the Italian consuls. For this reason, are in the Italian foreign ministers and not in Egypt.
Of course, the civil courts, the civil tribunal courts Italian, had few cases, but they were only the ones where there were 2 Italians, okay? So they were very little, because as you can imagine, when you have commercial things, there are few people coming from different countries. In this case, they finished to mixed course.
I don't know if there is maybe another question.
Thank you. Our law till now, according to la Code de Napoleon, in every aspect. Of course, the religion and fiqh and so is something else.
Yes.
But only criminology is coming from Italy. Why? All our law, yes, you can search for it.
That's
Why we adopted this thing? Another thing, maybe some of the people here know, we used to have a very noble personality, Signor Monti. He was married to a Russian lady, and they said that she was committed suicide here. I don't know if you have heard about this. So I don't know. It's not in the field of your research, 1864, 19. It's recently, yes.
Okay,
Okay,
don't
thank you
have,
very much.
I don't have any information. If you have some case until 1937, we can try to find it. Of course, yeah. By name, all that. If you, for example, I have also a very famous case of Ungaretti Pea in the 1807. For example, it was there was 3 Russian exiled person here in the port of Alexandria, and a demonstration for their liberation. And then Pei was in the crowd of manifestants, and we have this process for this trial, for example. Yeah, it depends. If you have if you want some information about specific case, we can try to find it, of course. And the other question, it was about let's see it. I think we have the Italian has a very good penal code, and for this reason, in Egypt in this epoch, in this era, take a lot of law from Europe. The majority it was from France, and then the same thing. The same it was in Tunisia. I think the criminal law is also from Italian, and it's that. I think it's not a very reason. It's because the penal code it was good. Yeah, I think for that.
Some very bad theory of Lombroso about the features of the criminals.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's super fiasco.
Yeah, of course. I'm of the south of Italy. I know Lombroso. Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Dottoressa Francesca, Dottoressa Costanza, Dr. Costantino, our Honorary Consul of Italy, His Excellency.
I'm sorry. I want to say thank to the translator. Yeah.
And I know that Your Excellency, you want to give some certificates out.
Yes.
And one more thing I want to tell you, we would like you all, after we finish the certificates, to take with us a collective picture all together outside. So please be ready to take the picture outside when we finish. Thank you.
This is a certificate for each one. So let's make some pictures here for each one. Thomas, please. Thomas, this is for you.
Thank you.
This is for you. واحد واحد؟ Ok, vuole fare uno per uno? Ok. Ognuno da solo. Allora, facciamo prima Francesca, Toma, vieni. Come please, Thomas. Ok, Costanza, dottoressa.
Shukran.
Prego.
Not yet.
No, fuori dalla
yes,
foto.
of course, sorry.
Fuori,
You
per
see, I'm
favore.
not very